Hey folks, welcome to another Triple T Thursday. For those just joining us, that's Tools, Tips, and Talk. We'll discuss info for the knife maker. On today's episode, we're going to finish the knife for the beginner series. We just got to sand the handle and sharpen it. Let's get right to it. So here's where we left off from last week. We got to sand the handle, and then we're going to sharpen this. But I had a lot of questions last week, or at least a couple, on thickness of handle scales and where to start. So I typically will start handle scales on knives like this around about a 1/4 inch. Okay, maybe a tiny bit thicker or thinner, depending on the handle. It also depends on the width of the handle, because you can, if the handle's a little wider, then you can make your scales narrower because it's going to be bigger in the hand because it goes this way. If it's a little narrower, you might want to make your scales a little thicker just so it fills up your hand. But for this knife, it worked out perfectly. They're just a hair over a 1/4 inch. So now we're going to sand this. We'll start with 220, 400, 800, and 1,000, and then we're going to buff it after. And I'm going to talk about pins, and then we're also going to be sanding the spine. We're going to be wrapping up the blade just so we don't damage it, but before we do that, I want to sand the spine right here and here so that I can wrap it up and I don't have to worry about this. Otherwise, I'm going to have to unwrap it later just to sand that. So for this, you need to have a hard backer to be sanding the spine, because otherwise you're just going to round this over. I've got the spine all sanded. Now I'm going to be using a knife vise, which I think is pretty critical just to be able to turn this around, and you'll see what I use it for. We're just going to lock it in with the handle exposed. So what I'm going to do now is just start at 220, and I'm just going to be doing long strokes with the grain of the knife, and I'm going to do all of the scales, the wood portion first, then I'll come back with a backer and then do the spine on that grit. And then I'll keep doing that with all the grits. And remember, we talked about pins earlier, and I'm using G10 pins, so they sand pretty much exactly the same as the wood, so I don't need to do anything different. If these were metal pins, brass, steel, whatever, definitely use a hard backer and sand that portion with the hard backer, and that will make sure that your pins come down the same level as the wood around them. Because if you just sand with your hand, you're going to dome that pin. When it comes to the palm side of the spine here, I like to use one of these half-round files, and that'll let you get into this curve. So now I got this all nice and smooth, okay, on all sides. Now I'm just going to go up to the next grit and repeat until I get to 1,000. So I got this sanded to 1,000, and now my favorite part of finishing a knife is to buff the handle. I've taped off the blade just because I don't want to hit this with the buffer and take off any of our acid finish. Make sure you clean your wheels or use separate wheels for handles, especially if you use really light colored wood, because if you had just finished buffing any kind of steel, you're going to deposit all of that into the pores of the knife. Here I'm using black walnut, so it doesn't matter all that much because it's pretty dark wood. I'm going to use white compound, and I'm going to buff the whole handle, and then we'll move over to the soft wheel and give it a nice shine. And there it is, all finished. Handle is nice and shiny. I love this finish. I usually just leave handles like this. If you want to put a little protective coating, I recommend get yourself some of this Pelican paste. I just love this stuff. I also love the way it smells. This is great for handles, but I definitely like to use it on the knives itself, just to protect the blade. It will protect it from rusting, and it's also great for handles. So I'm going to just put a little dose on the whole thing, and then I'm going to tape up the handle because we're going to sharpen it. So for sharpening, I don't use the old-fashioned water stones or anything like that. I'll show you what I actually use. What I used to use is this guy. This is a Wicked Edge system. They're quite expensive, and this comes with a bunch of stones that you set the knife up in a little jig, and it's got rods, and these things slide on the rods. And there's some pros and cons to this. You will get a very perfect, precise angle and edge with these things. They just take forever. It's a long time to set it up, and it's just I don't know. I just don't like it because it takes a really long time. The other thing that it does, it's great for short beveled knives like this, but when you get into something that's 7 or 10 inches, you just get these starts and stops because this is only so long. You'll do a stroke, so you'll see like little stroke marks on the sharpened edge. I don't like that. And yeah, I know you can go all the way up to the polishing stones, but the other downside to this is price. This is the lowest end one they have. This is the Wicked Edge Go, which is the portable one. This one is upwards of about $600 or $700 with the stones that I have. So it's quite expensive. And there are similar ones. There's some other ones out there. I won't name them all, but similar kind of systems. Some of them are great, some of them are not. If you have a 2x72 grinder, I'm going to show you what I think is the best one, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. Let's go take a look. So what I use for sharpening now is the Perfect Blade Sharpening Attachment. This is made by yours truly, so they're for sale on my website. You can also get them at housemade.us. Up in Canada, you can buy them at Maritime Knife Supply, and if you're over in Europe, you can get them at DIY Europe. Links to all those sites will be down in the video description. But what is this? It's really just an arm system that gives you a rail and a tool arm that goes into your 2x72. It fits any standard 1.5-inch tooling arms. It's got a bunch of adjustments that you can make. Typically, when I'm doing this, I will put the bar on the top and I will sharpen the knife up here. Okay, and you can set the angle and it just works really great. Then you don't have to have your grinder in reverse. If you have a reverse on your grinder, you can actually flip the arm forward and do it here. You can also move the plat, and it's so versatile. There's so many ways that you can grind with this and different configurations. It's meant for configuration. Also, it's super sturdy. This is 3/4 by 1.5-inch steel bar. These are 5/8 round. And the reason they're so sturdy is you can replace the bar on here if you do swords. So my upcoming Viking sword build, I'll be using this. So that's why these are so stiff. This is the thickest bar system on the market. Most of the ones you see are 1/4 inch. Those will flex. This will not flex when you are sharpening up and down. And that's why we go with such rigid bars on this system. These are just aftermarket holders. You can get these on Amazon. I'll put links down in the video description. I've locked my blade in here. And when you buy the Perfect Blade Sharpening Attachment, it'll even come with this rubber sticky-sided tape or whatever, so you can put on the inside of the jaws not to damage your blade. So I'm going to show you how this works. I've got this set up with a digital angle finder. I've set the the angle of the bar here. I'm going to sharpen this blade at 26 degrees, so I just zeroed the belt, and then on here. So now you guys can't see it, but it is about 26 degrees. We're going to start with a 120 grit belt, and we're going to set that initial bevel. And we're going to do it both sides, and we're going to count the number of passes we make on each side, okay, until we see a burr. And that's going to be a little flap that every time we sharpen, we see a little silver line appear. And that's a little piece of steel at the edge that as you sharpen, it just keeps folding back and forth. We need that because as we go up in grits, we're going to get finer and finer, and eventually the last step is to remove that burr by stropping. All right, let's get going. Remember folks, if you need anything for knife making, whether it's steel, handle material, tooling, you name it, check out Maritime Knife Supply. They even carry the perfect blade sharpening attachment. We're going to be having the grinder going very, very slow. If it's throwing sparks, you're going way too fast. Optionally, you can use a misting system to spray water, which is a good idea, particularly for chef knives where you have a very, very thin edge because you don't want to burn that edge. I'm going to be having it going it real slow, and this is pretty thick steel, so I'm not really worried about it burning the edge. I've also got this set up so that the edge of the blade is right after the crest of the wheel, and that will give it ever so slightly of a convex at the edge. So you don't really want this to be a total straight edge like up against a platen. So it's got a tiny little bit of give. We're going to be using no pressure. We're really just going to be dragging this with its own weight across the belt. So it's hard to see the burr on the camera, but I can definitely see it. If you can't see it, what you can do is just rub your finger across the blade and you should feel it. Yeah, so I can feel it all the way along on the opposite of the side you just sharpened. So now we're going to switch belts and go up the progression. This is a 120. We're going to go 220, 320, up to 600, and then at 1200. It was the 120 that took a long time to set the initial bevel, but after that, you're really only doing a couple of passes on each belt. Now I've gone up the grits past 1200 grit, and I've got a really nice burr, and it's super sharp, but it still has the burr on it. So now we're going to move to this leather belt, and the reason you want a leather belt is so you can put polishing compound. So I have some white buffing compound on here, and that's going to remove the burr. So for this, I'm actually going to raise it up a little bit so that it focuses everything on the belt just at that very edge, because that's where the burr is. So I'm just going to lift this up right here a little bit. Okay, an easy trick to tell if you've removed the burr is to just take it, put it on your thumbnail or any of your fingernails and just go down. You shouldn't feel anything, any kind of grab at all. It should be super smooth. So I've got this burr. Now I'm going to just clean off all of this polishing compound off the edge, and we'll do a little cut test. All right, we're all finished with this blade. Now let's test the sharpness. I like to use this U-line catalog paper. It's super thin. And what we're looking for is to make sure as we cut there's no tears. because that will indicate that there's a little piece of burr that we missed. So let's give it a shot. There you have it, folks. Razor sharp. So there it is, all finished. I'm really happy with how the handle turned out. Nice and shiny. Black walnut's always a great material to use. And as you saw, it's nice and sharp thanks to the Perfect Blade sharpening attachment. So next episode, we're going to be making a sheath for this guy, a leather sheath. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about intro to leather sheath making. And then we're going to be giving this away to a Patreon member. So if you're not a Patreon member, you probably should be. Thanks, folks. We'll see you on the next one.